Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of Beyond the Present podcast. I'm Daniel Morgan. I'm here joined live by Poujix from Canada. Hey there, my man. How's it going?
Everything's great, man. How are you?
Life is beautiful. And of course, we have our special guest back. Kenny is here again. So Kenny, my man, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
It is wonderful to have you, man. The feedback was great. We just want to have you again on board. And today we're talking about couples and how they influence one another, both consciously and subconsciously in terms of their behavior, preferences, lifestyle, and so many other factors. So let me just get started right here with Poujix. Poujix, how much influence do you think couples exert on one another?
I really believe, especially in the long term, I think it will have a major impact because most of the time you are spending most of your time with that person, right? Not most of your time, but then that is one individual that takes the most amount of time out of your interactions. So obviously you're going to be influenced by that person for sure.
That's right. And Kenny, what is your perspective on couples influencing one another?
I think it's true what Poujix said about spending more time with one another. And if you think about it, that makes a lot more sense because most couples do a lot of activities together. They go out, maybe watch a movie, go for food, cook together. And I think all those things really shape each other's behavior and attitude.
That's right, exactly. So the more time we spend with our basically partners, obviously, the more we are influenced by them. And I personally believe that couples do really influence each other on a very, very deep level, especially if you look at couples who've been together for many years, even decades. They even literally their facial expressions become almost identical at some point. It's just quite incredible. And I heard once that couples who have been together for a long time, they can actually know each other so well, they can literally finish each other's sentences and stuff, and they can know what they're thinking, all of those stuff. Yeah. True story, man. It's pretty amazing. I even actually met once a couple. They were married for 25, 30 years and so on. And the wife said, anytime my husband opens his mouth, I know what's going to say. Literally, it was quite incredible overall. So before we dive into how couples affect one another, let's just first ask you a question about which side influences the other. So, from your perspective, Poujix, what do you think about the level of influence between men and women? So, of course, we're going to right now talk about heterosexual relationships, and later we actually move on to homosexual relationships as well, for some of our audiences who might actually belong to the second category. But right now, in terms of heterosexual relationships, do you think men affect women more in these relationships, or women do so? Poujix, first you.
Well, I can actually give you an answer that covers the second category, the homosexual category too, because, what I believe in is that it really depends on the behavior that we're talking about or the belief system that we're talking about. If one person, no matter male or female or whatever they are, I think depending on the category of behavior that we're talking about, if one person sees the other person as the superior, as the role model, he or she will start being influenced by that person's behavior. Mm-hmm. So, for example, for example, my wife is a good cook in cooking, right. I will start to imitate her because I'm the inferior person. My experiences are less, so I'll try to learn from somebody, and who's there most of the time for me is my wife. So I will start, absorbing those, even not what I cook or how I cook, but That's rather right. even the way I cook.
Interesting.
I put the bowls first or whatever,
So are you saying that you were going to be influenced by your wife in terms of cooking, in the kitchen?
It could be a possibility.
So does that mean that, let's say in other areas of your life, let's say, for example, she is a good cook and you get a lot of advice from her in terms of where to go to eat and what to cook and whatnot. But do you tend to actually get advice from her for other things, like where to go on holidays or who should actually do this and that?
That could go the other way around. By the way, I don't have a wife. Just saying.
That's right.
So I'm not talking from experience. It's just an example.
That's right.
So
you can think of your experience with your girlfriends, for example. In your relationship with your girlfriend or your exes, who tended to somehow make the decisions and to be mainly in charge?
Well, I do like to take charge in general. Like
That's
in my
right.
life. I just enjoy that in general. So if nobody's picking up the baton, I'll take it. Sometimes even if others are willing, I'll definitely will interfere. But then if nobody else is taking charge, I'll definitely take charge. I do like that. So
this is your case, Poujix. Do you think this case applies to all men or just to you, where the men tend to influence the other partner more than women do?
Yeah, I think like that's true. I think that's a little bit of a male, characteristic. That
Okay.
The male tend like to take charge a little bit.
That's right.
Whether that's biological or whatever, this is a different discussion. But then I agree with that. I think it's a little bit. I'm not saying every single man wants to take charge and every single woman wants to follow. That's definitely not the case. But
exactly.
I think overall, this spectrum shifts towards men wanting to take charge in general.
Interesting. Let me move on here to Kenny. So, Kenny, from your perspective, which side influences the other more, the man or the woman?
I think to really answer that question objectively would be hard, because really with two people in a relationship, it's both are bringing their own personalities in. And for one person, say if you have a female and a male, I'm talking about a heterosexual relationship.
Right. That's right.
But say if one person has always been submissive, then the other person, whatever the other person would say, the other person will follow because
exactly
of that trait, and that could be the male or the female. And it's hard to so what I'm saying is it will be more subjective, based on the couple itself. But if you want to generalize it, yes, for sure there would be things that both the male and the female will influence in each other. For example, it can be little things like if the way one person drives the car, the way they drive on the road.
That's right.
If one person is more vigilant, more responsible driving, and the other person is more fast driving, then that can have an influence on the other person being more responsible on the road as well.
Very
just
good.
Because they've seen that in their partner.
Okay, and let's move on to you guys. First, you, Kenny. I believe you are currently in a relationship right now. So, in your own relationship, how much influence do you tend to exert on your partner, and how much does she on you?
Look, so I've been dating my girlfriend for 8 months now.
That's right.
And I think it's fair to say that over these 8 months, I've learned a lot. You see a lot of things that obviously when you talk about them, you say different things. But then when you see other things in the other person, those are the unspoken things that you see over time.
Wow. Oh my gosh. You make it look like one of these episodic movies and stuff, like Solve the Mystery. Pretty cool, man. I like it. The one mystery between this one couple that never got solved.
Yeah, so it's more about I think it goes back to the podcast about body language.
Exactly.
It goes back to the podcast because at the end of the day, if I'm spending so much time with my partner, I also see other things that she does in her own personal life, in her own professional life. What does she do? Does she take charge of things? If she has issues that bother her, how does she take what kind of solutions does she come up with those problems?
Exactly.
Does she tend to postpone it, ignore it, or does she tend to take them head on and find solutions and reach out to people? I think that's something that is important because at the end of the day, I want to know that my partner is making progress. I want to know that she has a good mindset, that she knows she can do. She doesn't feel stuck if she's stuck in a problem. Sorry, and us being partners, we always reach out to each other for advice.
Very good.
And I think that's good. But also we both acknowledge the fact that one person giving advice to the other doesn't mean we have to follow that advice.
Great point. That's right. I got it so far. And before we move on to exact details, let's also address basically homosexual relationships between men and women, both sides, and how they might be slightly different than more conventional relationships. So, Poujix, do you have any opinion about this regard? How do you think gay and lesbian couples might do it differently than us heterosexuals?
Well, it would be very speculation on my part. I don't really know those kind of relationships that well. But at the end of the day, and my first answer, like, sorry, to your first question was kind of cumulative too, because I do believe that two people, no matter whether they're in a relationship or not, they are going to affect each other differently. And the amount of time that these two that are in a relationship spend with each other obviously amplifies that. And because of the fact that there's a huge amount of, emotions involved in romantic relationships of any kind, then that effect, again, is multiplied due to the fact of the emotion playing a massive role. So there's no doubt about the influence of any kind of couple.
That's right.
In my opinion. But then, I know a couple of people who are in heterosexual relationships that, so again, that goes with one person takes the dominant roles
all the time. It doesn't matter what it is, heterosexual or homosexual. One person usually leads the relationship.
Right, exactly.
Great point.
And sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it has the tendency to become like sort of like the distribution of tasks. So in some areas, some takes more responsibilities and leadership, and in some other areas, some other. But then in general, like if you divide it in single tasks, then definitely at some point one person is taking the charge in general, and that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, because if two people are taking charge, then it's not necessarily a good thing, because at the end of the day, one person has to make final call.
Exactly.
And I think it's a good thing. But then you can distribute this leadership task based on your abilities and your familiarity with the subject that you're trying to move forward with.
Fantastic.
So I think that's it's regardless of the type of relationship.
Fabulous.
Like
Great. Let me just also hear Kenny's opinion about this matter.
About homosexual relationships?
Exactly, and whether or not they might differ in any ways in terms of who tends to influence the other party the most.
I think overall the main values would be the same. The main things that one person influences and the other would be the same. There might be gender biases that you see in a heterosexual that obviously would not be there in a homosexual relationship. So some issues that might pop up in a heterosexual relationship would not even be in the radar for a homosexual relationship.
Would you give an example like what, for example? I'm right now thinking about an example.
So, I'm just going to go really conventional here, but say, think about man taking charge in a relationship. And if the woman in the relationship is also high-headed and has always been producing great results in her life,
exactly,
then that might cause issues in the sense that the woman also wants to take the charge.
Exactly. That's right. Because usually we have these gender biases which do not apply to this type of relationship. And you're right. Ultimately, it's more about their personality and their belief system than their actual gender, whether we're talking about hetero or homo relationships. It's all great. So back to the exact ways of dealing with our partner and how we can influence them. So I'm going to move on here to Poujix. Poujix, assume that you are with your girlfriend now and you want to influence her a little bit. Perhaps you have some suggestions and whatnot. And boops, they're right in there. She actually disagrees with you and says, no, I'm not going to do this. For example, you have some suggestions to where to go, how, for example, what she should dress and whatnot. You offer some kind of suggestions. You attempt to influence her and to change her in some way. And then she immediately rejects that attempt and somehow ignores it. So in such a situation where your attempt at influencing the other party fails, how do you react? Like, do you tend to get angry? Do you tend to start a fight? What's your general reaction in such a situation when you cannot effectively influence your partner?
Right. Obviously, there are circumstances that you behave very emotionally and, react to the situation. But then I tend to overall like to not react to situations, but rather play the long game. So, and there are obviously different issues. Some of them are merely suggestions. Some of them I actually want to influence. The ones that are merely suggestion, I personally really don't care. It's just a suggestion. You can do this. They can pick up or let it go. But then if I'm actually trying to influence the person, then I like to, if I'm in the right mind, hopefully I am, I like to play the long game. So I wouldn't really react defensively. I would react, okay, this is your, at the same time, yeah.
You don't shout or something, like, you little girl, you listen to what I'm telling you right now. I mean, not like this.
So hopefully not. Exactly. That's the point. First of all, it's not really healthy anyways, right? It's not gonna, and most importantly, if that person immediately is rejecting my proposal, there's very little chance if I go defensive or even aggressive, I would make any influence anyways. So even if for the sake of having that influence, I have to play it a little bit political, I guess you can say.
Interesting,
but not in a dirty way. I mean,
politics is never dirty, man. We all know that. We don't know that politics is never dirty. Come on.
Never.
That's right.
Ever.
That's
Who
right.
said that?
That's right.
Right. So yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is like, try to, lose a battle to win a war.
Oh boy, that's definitely not politics. I'm pretty sure about that one. So let's move on here. To Kenny. So that's right. So Kenny, what is your perspective? Let's say you attempted to influence your partner, your girlfriend, and then she just rejects it or doesn't agree with it. How do you actually play the game from then on?
I think it's a good question. And in terms of the person not even listening to what you're offering or your suggestion or your advice, I think if the person is already, say if my girlfriend is already in a more defensive position, then I would acknowledge that fact, and it wouldn't make sense for me to continue giving suggestions because she's not in the right mindset.
Wow. At that moment, or just for the rest of that relationship?
At that moment.
Okay, that's right. So it's a temporary move.
Right.
Okay.
And then, I think depending on what kind of advice you're giving, but you can always, when the other person cools off or has her mind goes away from being defensive, then you can always come back to it. And I think there's, like, Poujix is talking more about like stalling it, but also not being more defensive. But I don't think it's a bad thing to be defensive or aggressive.
So you think it's okay to be aggressive? I mean,
Yeah,
I asked Poujix as well. Like, for example, let's say you want your girlfriend to dress a certain way. Maybe like you want to go somewhere and you want her to dress a certain way, or you prefer to go somewhere and she says no. So would you get like aggressive, like, listen to me, girl, I'm gonna tell you do this and you do it now? I mean, like, do you tend to get aggressive yourself?
I won't get like aggressive in that sense, but I would voice my opinion. Okay, like this is important to me.
Okay.
And this is something that matters.
That's
and
right.
I wouldn't say that I want you to do. So one thing that I've discovered in a relationship is that if I say I want you to do something, that my girlfriend takes it in a more, like a man talking to a girl.
Wow, man. I like the attitude. Holy moly. Like, when I tell my girlfriend something, she better understand it because I ain't going to repeat myself for the second time.
Right. So I've voiced my intentions to her. So I'm not really saying that I want you to do it in
That's
that
right.
like patriarchal man saying to a woman.
That's right.
But I'm saying it like I told her that I say it to anyone. Like, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. I'm not giving you orders. I'm just saying, okay, I want you to do this, because at the end of the day, if I'm telling you something, I might have seen you do that before. So I'm thinking, okay, like that's something you can do better. But in terms of asking for, like change, I think that's really influenced by what you know about other people. So say if you're going to an event and you know people are going to be dressed up, then it's being influenced by that. It's not just popping out of anywhere. You just want your girlfriend to dress well because she doesn't dress well. It's popping out of the it's more subjective. So in the sense that because the event itself is going to have a different dress code,
exactly.
you would want to fit in to that dress code.
Interesting.
And I think there's nothing wrong in that, because if you explain it that way to your partner and she understands it, then she wouldn't think that you're trying to change her. You're just trying to tell her, okay, this is the event and this is what the event is for, and that this is what the people are going to be dressed like. So why don't we dress like that? And then that way she would take it in a more, it's more positive reinforcement.
Very good. I kind of get it right now. Like for Poujix, basically, he plays, quote unquote, clean politics. He says, honey, you don't want to get dressed? I totally understand. Oh, by the way, I think I lost my wallet, so I guess you're going to have to pay for the dinner yourself. So he plays for the, so he goes passive aggressive here and like goes like, lose the basically battle to win the war thing. But you on the other hand tend to exert yourself a little bit more. It's like, honey, let me just explain to you. Here's our bullet points. Look at the slide chart right here. If you take a look at this slide right now, you can see here are the reasons why. You try to explain yourself.
I think also, just adding on to that point, it also comes down to your personality trait. And in our relationship, me and my girlfriend, we have kind of established that I tend to be more logical sometimes.
That's right.
And she tends to be more emotional sometimes. Mm-hmm. So for me, explaining her the logical sense behind it, she wouldn't, like at this point in a relationship, she doesn't get mad about it because she knows that's the way I process information.
Good point.
And then for her to get emotional, I'm not thinking. I'm actually trying to process her emotions because that's just it's just a personality trait that we bring into this relationship. But I think that's really key because if I'm telling something to her in a more logical sense and she doesn't even understand because she's emotional, then anything we communicate would not be like, it would be just futile, right? We can't even communicate with each other.
Interesting. Very good point. So right now, of course, in a more traditional sense, generally men tend to take lead in relationships. However, nowadays we have a phenomenon called feminism, as you guys are all aware of it, where oftentimes women prefer to take charge as well. And nowadays, of course, in the popular culture, people are talking about sharing responsibility 50-50 and a democratic approach towards the leadership of a relationship. So, Poujix, do you think it's really possible for basically a couple to divide the leadership role in a 50-50 manner, or one side usually dominates the other? So do you think this whole feministic ideal is actually realistic?
Look, I mean, it's possible to make it less it's possible to bring the scales closer together. Of course, I agree with that, and I do like to do that because, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not an expert on everything. Again, when it comes to cooking, I know squat. I don't know anything. So I like to leave that responsibility to somebody that knows better. Even if I have a roommate and my roommate is a very good cook, I like to leave that responsibility to him. I mean, because I'm not, right? So that I agree with, and I think it's a good thing to do overall. But then at the end of the day, in a couple's relationship, I think one scale will be a little bit pivoted upwards and one a little bit downwards, if not the difference being a lot. I think it will eventually be, if you have to pick, if you're judging a couple, I think you will be eventually able to, excuse me, tell the distinction, okay, this person is a little bit more dominant and the other person isn't. But then again, it's very possible to bring the scales very closer together for sure.
Fantastic. And Kenny, what's your perspective?
Sorry, what's the question?
In terms of the sharing of the the leadership role in a relationship, so is it possible for couples to share their leadership role in a 50-50 manner so that no side is really dominant and they're just sharing everything equally?
Mm-hmm. I think it is possible objectively for sure, and I think it's depend. And again, if there's two people in the relationship who both tend to be dominant, then they do have to understand that aspect of the relationship, and then kind of distribute that idea within the relationship. And like I wouldn't be surprised if that leads to a lot of conflicts and a lot of That's
exactly what I was thinking about. Because sharing, if both sides are dominant, man, there'll be some problems.
No, I want. Yeah, for sure. And for one person who sometimes tends to be submissive, and if the other partner is saying, okay, no, why don't I do this, or they tell you what to do, and then you're like, yeah, I'll do it. So in that case, the relationship is it's all good, and I don't see any issues with one person being dominant and the other not. It really comes down to the way you act in your own personal life. It has nothing to do with being in a relationship. it's really the matter of how you would act in your professional life. Say when you're at work, or how would you act in, say, even in a school setting when you're in a group assignment. How do you take charge and assign work to all the teammates, or do you just wait for the leader to give you tasks and then you work on those tasks?
Fantastic. Bravo. These are great points. And let's just now move on to the last part because we don't have a lot of time left. So in the last part, I want you guys to give one tip to ladies and one tip to gentlemen in order to influence their partners, basically. And before I share my own opinion, so Poujix, what is your advice for one tip that you have for men that could make it easier for them to influence their girlfriends, wives, basically?
Right. I mean, I will give one for both. Basically, is to get out of when you're dealing with somebody, get out of your own mindset. Try to understand it from their point of view, and see what are the things that can change that point of view to your liking. Regardless of whether you're a woman or a man, I think that will definitely help a lot. If you try to understand, if you're a woman, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of your boyfriend or your husband, I think it helps a lot to absorb his point of view.
That's right.
And vice versa.
Fantastic. Kenny, any a tip you got for the couples to influence one another, basically?
I think what plays a key role in my relationship, for example, is me understanding what is the top love language for my girlfriend. And the reason I'm saying that is because if I know the way my girlfriend likes to be loved or likes to be shown love towards, then having that knowledge in a situation when there's a conflict, or in a situation when there's a time when we don't get along, then I can use that as a trick to get back and then, just reconcile and then move on. The reason I'm saying that is also because with you knowing the love language also shows that you're taking the initiative to know how the other person functions.
Fantastic.
And I think that plays a good role. And like Poujix said, and this is something we apply in our relationship too. Whenever one person is too stressed out or in the zone, then we sometimes give the other person their space.
Bravo.
And then we both acknowledge that, okay, they're in the zone, and eventually they're going to come back, and then we will be they'll come back to us, whoever the other person is in the relationship. And that happens all the time. And when that happens, then the other person can explain, okay, what was going on in their head. And there's multiple situations that are thrown at you in your life, and things pop up left and right. But at the end of the day, if you play as a team, if you work as a team, I think that's important. And having that perspective where you don't think about yourself, but you think about you and your partner as a team, I think that plays a big role.
Wow. Teamwork, man. It's all about teamwork. Having that teamwork mindset is very, very critical, obviously, to be able to maintain a long-term relationship. And I want to also give one tip for gentlemen and one tip for ladies in terms of being able to influence their partners. For gentlemen, the key phrase is this: change her mood, not her mind. I repeat, change her mood, not her mind. So let's say, for example, right now you are discussing certain things with your partner and she tends to disagree or whatnot, or she has certain ideas. One of the biggest problems and mistakes that men tend to make is that they tend to use rational terminologies and logic to persuade her in certain ways. And that, from my perspective, usually leads to more resistance. However, next time you faced resistance with your girlfriend or wife, do not try to convince her using logic. Instead, change her mood. Let me give you an example. For example, let's say you want to go to this restaurant, and she says, no, I don't want to go to this restaurant, I want to go to that place. So in that case, you can say, honey, let me just Google this thing. Based upon the charts that you can see right now and this website, the number of visitors, you're giving a lot of logical reasons why she should go there. She is not going to change her mind. So instead of that, change her mood. How? For example, look her in your eyes and say, honey, just look in my eyes. Let me ask you something. Do you want to have fun? She says, well, of course I want to have fun. Well, let me tell you something. Just look in my eyes and let me tell you something right now. With me, it is always fun. it doesn't matter where we go. It's always fun. Do you agree? You see, you literally try to change her emotional state. And then at that time, once her mood is changed, let's say you hug her, you kiss her, you cuddle around a little bit. And once her mood is changed, at that time, she is easily influenced to say, oh, by the way, now that you're like hugging and whatnot, by the way, you want to check that place, that restaurant? Of course she'd say yes, right? And now let's move on to the ladies. Okay. For the ladies, here's my advice for you. Understand that the smartest ladies out there and the ones who get the most from men are the women who make the man feel like he is in charge. The key word here is feel. Make him feel like he's in charge. Make him feel like he's the boss by telling him these things, and then offers suggestions that will ultimately will be your plans. So the smartest women in relationships are the ones who pretend to be submissive and who make their partner look like the boss, but ultimately make the decisions themselves. Because when a man feels like he's the boss, and then he does what you want him to do, he will still feel good. So it's like a win-win solution. So please do not undermine this factor. Do not try to belittle your basically partner's masculinity and power. Make him feel in power. Make him feel in charge, but then say, by the way, boss, don't you want to go to this restaurant? In that case, of course he will say yes. So he feels like a boss, but he's actually doing what you asked him to do. So ultimately, to summarize it for both sides, for men, the key phrase is this: change her mood, not her mind. And for ladies, make him feel like he's in charge, but then you make the decisions yourself. That's basically all of that I have for now. If you want more tips, of course, we're going to have to wait for our future episodes. We're going to share more tricks in the future about relationships. But for now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up the show. Let's move on here to basically Poujix. Poujix, my man, after all that we talked today about the concept of influence in relationships, what is now your final thought?
Don't doubt that there are going to be effects and influences. Of course, there are going to be. Notice that you are being influenced because you might not like those influences, or you might actually like them. So try to adopt the ones that you want and refuse the ones that you don't want. And be respectful of your partner's opinion, but at the same time, if you want to influence something, if something is important to you, definitely share that for sure. Why not? Fantastic. And Kenny, what is your final comment?
I would say in a relationship, there's a lot of key factors that play a role. Working as a team is always important, and also looking at things from the other person's point of view. But at the end of it, just expressing your love and affection for the other person is also key, because that kind of is very important in a relationship. And also understand that if things don't work out, that is totally fine, and you just have to learn and grow, and that's also a part of being in a relationship. You learn and grow a lot.
Wow, so true, man. Great points. Really a lot of great content here today. Thanks to both of you, Poujix and Kenny, for your great ideas. It was very wonderful. And for our listeners out there, if you're on iTunes, do us a favor and send us some rankings and whatnot. You can now reach us basically on Podbean as well as YouTube. And of course, if you have any comments, please leave us the comments on the websites. It was a pleasure being with you guys, and hopefully we'll be with you next week. This was Beyond the Present podcast, and I'm Daniel Mulligan. Thank you very much.